early age, we learn this behavior. It's a habit that if there's a challenge and uncertainty, you feel anxiety, find authority to help you out. If you don't unlearn this behavior, that's a path to the dark side. That's you not learning how to access your own agency.
Welcome to the Leader's Mindset, where we bring you conversations with leaders who are making an impact in business and our communities. Today, I'm here with Nikola Ilic, founder and CEO of ChangeLab Global. Thanks for being here today, Nikola.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I was really excited when you reached out because of your background, and I can't wait to dig into the really impactful background you've had. But before we get into your past, tell us right now what you're working on. What is the mission of ChangeLab Global, and what are you doing to achieve that mission?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's probably a good place to start of what I'm doing now, and then we're gonna develop from there because my mission is connected to my whole background. The Change Lab has currently a mission of bringing a Harvard level leadership development to millions, because I feel that through my personal experience, through my education, I was exposed to particular frameworks that I found later are not that widespread, but extremely powerful and useful. And the mission now is, okay, how do we take these frameworks that are battle tested, and how do we enable others, individuals and organizations, to put them to use? Because I think now than ever these days, we need more people to take more leadership. And I guess another thing is that we at ChangeLab, we have our own framework that is based on both science, research, practice, and it basically teaches people super practical leadership skills, but also mindsets, practices, habits. And the idea is not only to teach people how to lead, but also teach people who to become, and teach people how to lead in a way that doesn't only solve particular problems that their company or organization is trying to solve, but also to live a life that's worth living.
Yeah, and that's near and dear to my heart because I did 20 years in the Air Force, and we also have a lot of leadership frameworks. We don't always talk about it that way in the military, but we have all these leadership frameworks, especially as we think of bringing things from strategy down to the tactical or task level. And that's what I noticed. I think a lot of people think leadership is a lot of intuition and shooting from the hip, but great leaders are really using these frameworks for how they think and how they act, right?
Well, you're right. There are many ways to learn leadership, and frameworks help. Nothing replaces action and experience. That's another thing, right? I think in today's world, when you receive some kind of a training, whether it's in your high school, universities, or in your job, some kind of training, either you receive a lot of data information, and then you have to kind of memorize or have, or you receive some kind of workshop that's very common. You get to some action and interaction, but it's actually more entertainment than learning. What we're trying to do, and my approach to this, is that in order to learn leadership, you have to go through an experience. And learning leadership is closer to how you learn how to walk, or how you learn to ride a bike, or how to learn how to even drive a plane, where yes, some information will be helpful, but you really gotta get to the action part, and you have to experience it. And that's why sometimes we know, probably even our listeners or viewers, they know people who they admire as leaders who probably never went through a single leadership training, but they went through particular experiences, and they were lucky enough to make it out of them, and then make sense of them and learn from them. I think that what we're doing now is we're trying to accelerate that, so that you don't have to be lucky to get through a particular experience and make sense of it, and that teaches you something about leadership. But actually, we can design programs, experiences. Programs can be sometimes few days to few months, where participants would go through particular experiences where you learn about how do you relate to yourself, how do you understand yourself, how do you relate to power, authority, how do you relate to each other, how do you have a difficult conversation, and so forth. So it's, I guess, long story short, it all boils down to this idea of you got to have a significant experience and you have to make sense of it in order to learn more about leadership and become a better leader.
Yeah, there's so much to it, right? From the how do you think about it, how do you take action, down to who is the leader you want to be. So who are some of the clients you're working with, and how do you help them develop the leadership programs in their companies?
So our partners now, the most significant ones are the Obama Foundation, UNICEF. We work with several government programs as well, a few private sector companies. And what we do for them is, first, we try to understand. They come to us and say, hey, we want to have this, we want to have a program, or we want to redesign the existing program. And we always ask, okay, well, what is the challenge? And what are you trying to achieve? What do you want people to learn? What is the organization lacking that you need more of? So the first step is always, hey, it's not like, hey, here's a leadership training that's for everybody, but what do you need? And we kind of like do this coaching, asking a bunch of questions to get to the bottom of the problem. And then we help them, okay, now that we know better what the problem is, what you're trying to achieve, let's talk about what kind of curriculum you need. Then we design a curriculum. Is it something that you want to do in a few weeks or a few months? Ideally, I always recommend that, particularly if you want to work with the mid-level and up leaders, you need a bit longer programs, because personal transformation does take time. And I like to advise my clients, and this is advice to anyone listening to this, is whenever you learn something new, immediately try it in the real life. And that's because very often learning comes from action before you understand. The action will help you understand the theory better. So if you learn a new concept, so that's what I advise clients in that second stage of designing a curriculum and program. Like, hey, ideally, you have one workshop every 2 weeks or once a month where we teach people a new tool. Is it how to build trust, or is it how to have a difficult conversation, or is it how to lead a team? And then you give them at least a few weeks to apply it, to immediately put it into the work. So after we design a curriculum, then we help them deliver. And deliver is very important, because you do have to have good frameworks. You need to have a good content, but the way you teach really matters. And I use something called tacit teaching, and we can talk about it now or later, but that's this idea of extreme focus on action, even within the workshop. If it's 2 hours, it's going to be me talking for maybe 30 minutes altogether. Everything else is participants doing the work and talking to each other. And
Yeah, that action piece is so important, and the reinforcing it through action piece is so important. So tell us a little bit about tacit leadership and how you use it to help the people you're working with.
Tacit, yeah, it's tacit learning. So there are two pieces to my work. One is the framework. I have this framework that we use in ChangeLab called the Democratic Leadership Framework, and we can talk about that, which is a content side. And it has nothing to do with politics. It's just this idea that there's a reason why democracies are more successful than autocracies. It's because they enable more people to develop more of individual talent and then to collaborate better together. So if you have more people who reach their potential, or they're high, and they know how to collaborate together, it's a winning combination for any organization. So we're teaching individuals and companies, organizations, how to use democratic leadership framework to release the potential of the whole organization. And we can get into details of what is that framework has. But then, as I said, tacit learning is particular pedagogy of learning, or pedagogy of teaching as well. You have to teach through constant interaction. And actually, the first thing I do, the first workshop, the first interaction I usually have with, either is it with my students at Georgetown where I teach, or with any workshop, is I try to break the dependency that participants have on me. And I kind of tell them, I actually can't teach leadership. And they're like, well, isn't that what we came here for you to teach us leadership? And I tell them, well, I can show you the way. I can, and again, I use the bike metaphor always. And I asked them, how did you learn how to ride a bike? And I said, I bet it's not by reading a book or watching YouTube. Maybe it can help. I don't know. I bet, maybe you had a bike coach, you had a parent around. And what can parent do, right? Can give you courage, can give you a little bit of advice, can get you a nice bike. You'll have maybe a helping wheels for a while, but at the end, you are the one getting on the bike or not. But more importantly, you're the one who will fall. 100%. You will fall. And that's the moment of truth. Are you going to get up, get on a bike, knowing that this is going to happen again? So you have to work through a bit of a physical and emotional pain to get on a bike, knowing that you're going to fall again, but that's what it takes. You got to keep going until you find that balance, and then you have it in you. It's like, and that's exactly how you learn leadership. As a professor or a trainer or a coach, my job is to create the most conducive environment and to enable you to get on the bike. So when I do the teaching is all about creating space for action. So if we teach how to use storytelling for leadership, extremely powerful skill, there's a little bit of a framework that I give, but then I give example, like, let me tell you my story. And then people listen to my story and like, aha, okay, so that's how you tell a story. And then, aha, what worked in my story? So, but then we debrief. So we use a model. And then, okay, so why don't you work on your story a little bit? So they have to work, they have some time. And then they start sharing their own stories in the workshop and give each other feedback. And then we reflect on that. So at the end of the workshop, basically working on their story and analyzing my story and other people's stories, which is, action, more than listening to the theory. And then theory makes a way more sense to them because they see the practical application of it. They tried it and they came out of the workshop with something that they can use immediately, which is always my goal. The tacit learning is all about teaching students that they don't depend on you, but that they are responsible for individual and collective learning. Like, they have to learn from each other, and they also have to learn how to create space for each other to learn, because if you're going to learn leadership, you need to go deep. You need to be honest. You need to go to the places of vulnerability, places of insecurity, and it's everyone's responsibility in the group that you're, in the cohort, to create that space for each other.
Yeah,
And
at
then,
some point we all have to get pedaling on our own, and then we can all be pedaling together, right?
exactly, and it's really about, it's sometimes I say, yeah, I'm in leadership development industry, but what I'm really in is habit formation industry. Like, we are teaching people how to change or form new habits, and not just habits of, when do I wake up, when do I eat, and all of that, but the habits of mind. What do I do in the face of uncertainty? What do I do when I'm scared? What do I do when someone disagrees with me? What do I do when I feel triggered? Um, and for these things to be changed, you're gonna have to be very honest with yourself in front of others. And what's gonna happen is that very basic human, I want to say, basic human structures, basic human skills of necessity to connect, belong, a necessity to matter, to understand your own purpose, they emerge. So in the cohort learning, where we're going deep and we're creating trust among each other so we can go deep, we recognize each other's challenges because we are going through something similar at the same time. Because everybody had the crisis of identity and insecurity and fear of this and fear of that. And once you open up that space and that connection, then I'm not teaching alone anymore. Now everybody has some experience. Everybody has something to contribute to. Then they start teaching each other. And this is a huge lesson, I think, because big part of my approach to leadership is that we have to teach people how to exercise their own agency, but also, and this is where it usually stops for many programs. Like, oh, I'm going to teach you now how to be a self-reliant and how to be a strong leader. But what I want to teach them is, once you understand how to exercise your own agency, the path to great leadership, to effective leadership, is how do you teach others to also exercise their own agency? Because what happens if you just teach people, hey, this is how you become effective, they go on and then they kind of like they become effective, but they start creating dependency on themselves. Meaning, they like to be important. They like to be for others to come and ask them, what about this? What about that? And I'm trying to teach them, no, now your job is not to have all the answers, because you don't, but to enable all the talents. And that's you now creating agency in others. And that's how leadership becomes, instead of zero-sum game, it becomes the abundance game. It becomes, how do we create more power and more leadership in wherever I am, my team, my organization, my community, even my family. So that now the sum of all leadership potential that we have in this organization or team is larger than what we had before. And then, man, then you can do a lot more. Going back to I'm going to finish on this note. Think about any grown up or any person that you admire. It doesn't have to be anyone famous. And then ask yourself a question: why do you admire that person? And it's usually going to be because the way they made you feel. And probably it's going to be because they believed in you, which means, and believing in someone means that you think that they have what it takes in themselves to go through life or to do something. They don't need only you. They don't need to depend on someone else, but they can actually do it. That doesn't mean they're like alone and they'll do everything alone, but it means that you believe that they have capacity. And that's such a powerful thing, right? And we can talk about the roots of that and how it's connected to psychology and the way we grew up.
We're going to talk about all of it, but you hit on something really important that I'm a big believer in, and that's something bigger than ourselves, right? I'm a firm believer that we form teams as humans to take care of things, to create things that are bigger than we can create on our own. And I think that's so important that you're making that a key component, a core of what it is you teach and you promote in leadership. And I think it's also really important for our audience right now to understand this is not theoretical or academic on your part. Before you were a CEO, before Georgetown, before Harvard, you got your earliest leadership experiences as a pro-democracy activist in your native Serbia. So tell us how you got started in the pro-democracy movement and how that shaped your view of leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, I live and work in Washington, D.C. now, but I'm originally from Serbia, which is Southeast Europe. And I was actually born in a country that doesn't exist anymore. It used to be called Yugoslavia. That country went through a war and became multiple countries, including Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia, so forth. And that was happening in the 90s. The war started when I was 8, and my family was impacted in different ways. And I was confused when it all started, because one happy big country suddenly started shooting at each other. But when I was about 14 or 15, I joined this non-violent resistance movement called Otpor, which means resistance in Serbian. And I was just a high school kid. And I remember I went to their office. I was with a friend of mine, and we didn't know what to expect. It was just, they seemed cool. They had this kind of like a fist as a symbol, and they had a lot of funny stickers about the authoritarian that was, at the time Serbia was a dictatorship. And we thought it was funny and cool. And then we get there, and some grown-ups, and when you're 15, someone who is 25 is a grown-up for you, 24, they took us very seriously. It's like, oh, look, these kids want to join us. And that was pretty cool to be taken seriously by someone who's older than you, right? And they gave us a little bit of training, and we became part of the movement. Again, I was just a kid running around with posters and whistle and protesting and putting stickers and being chased by police and all of that. But what happened is that in about a year and a half, that movement became instrumental in the fall of that dictatorship. So in the year 2000, Slobodan Milosevic fell. The most important part of that revolution was the resistance movement. And I like to say, even though I was a tiny little part of that movement, and my contribution to the revolution was like tiny, I was forever changed. Because that idea that, students and youth could organize and go against dictator who has military and police. So that forever set me on a journey to better understand what does it take. I became obsessed with this question: how does anyone become a dictator? Are just people like, stupid questions at the beginning, like, are people just like bad, or what happens to them? Why did they start abusing power? How does politics work? How does power work? How does change work? What makes people better or worse leaders? And then that set me on the path. And we can talk about it now. About I co-founded a few other movements.
I do want to get into that, because it wasn't enough for you to overthrow one brutal dictator. You founded and have been part of other pro-democracy movements, and still are, all around the world. So tell us about some of the other groups you're part of, what you founded, and how you've helped teach people all around the world to lead democratically.
Yeah. In 2008, we realized that, I was still in Serbia at the time. We realized that while dictatorship fell, people's mindset was still the same. Meaning, people were still expecting some great leader to come and solve all of their problems, which means people were still very dependent on some kind of authority. They didn't have agency. So we created an organization, at the time it was called Serbia on the Move, to start teaching people basics of community organizing or self-leadership and community leadership. Like, hey, instead of waiting for someone to do something about even clean up a park or put a pedestrian cross here or hold this person accountable, what if you do something about this? And by the way, we're not just gonna ask you to do it, we're gonna teach you how to do it. So this movement started very small, 7 of us. And the key difference from anything else that existed at the time was that we didn't just recruit people, we gave them very thorough training, like basics in leadership and leading. We would teach them how to tell a story of who you are and why you even want to be part of this movement, or why you want to solve a problem in your neighborhood. Then we would teach them, how do you recruit? How do you build trust? We taught people, how do you lead a team? Many people don't know how to lead a team, especially if you're dealing with like younger folks. And we were focusing a lot on people in their early 20s, never led a team in their life. And then you give them a team to lead. So a bunch of folks, for the first time, they had to go and recruit someone. And that's very difficult, because you're going to get a lot of no's. And the key learning is not in recruiting, but is dealing with getting so many no's. It's like, okay, being rejected and dealing with rejection as you're recruiting, man, that's tough. And then you have to lead a team, and you're scared. And like I have to now have 10 people. I have to I remember, and then we teach them how to do that, and then they go and they lead a team for a few months, and they're changed people after that. Because when you learn that you can deal with rejection, that you can still recruit some people, that you can lead a team and actually strategize together, you are a different person. Through that's basically leadership development. What happens is that basically you are developing people's agency. You're teaching them how to exercise leadership. That movement, and that we were lucky. We got connected with the professor at Harvard, Marshall Gantz. We were just dumb kids who decided to email a professor at Harvard, and he responded. I still don't know why he responded. I have to ask him. He's now a friend of mine, someone who is my mentor, Marshall Gantz, and that he gave us a training and so forth. Long story short, basically, he gave us the framework. We used it. Our movement exploded in thousands of volunteers. It changed modalities in different ways. Today, it changed even the name, or out of that movement grew a new movement that's called now Move and Change, or Kreni Promeni in my native language. And that's now the biggest movement in Serbia. It's 2025. I take a big satisfaction in the fact that the people who are leading that movement right now were some random folks that we recruited in 2009 that we never met before. And one of them couldn't even speak in front of 5 people, how shy she was. And we gave them trainings, gave them opportunity to lead and to screw up and to learn from that and to keep going. And now they're leading a movement. They're like famous people in that country. They're well known, and they're leading the movement way better than we who started it ever did. Out of that movement, not only that we now have the biggest movement in Serbia, and it's been since 2009 or 8, but many other smaller local movements emerged. So I guess what I'm trying to say here, going back to that idea that it's not just about becoming or teaching others how to lead, it's about teaching them how to create more leaders.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that our most important job as leaders is developing the future leaders that come along after us. I mean, there's a lot of important jobs in leadership, but I think that's the most important one.
Absolutely. We all heard this, what is the proverb, the Chinese proverb, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach men how to fish, feed him for life. And I want to add the second, another level, teach men how to teach others to fish, and you feed the whole village. And that's what I'm talking about.
And there's a difference, right? There's a difference between teaching someone how to fish, and there's a difference in teaching someone something and then teaching someone how to teach something.
Yes.
They're very different skills.
Yes, there are different skills and different mindsets. Because if you understand, hey, my job as someone who wants to lead is not just to lead, but to either create followers, but to create more leaders. You have to adjust your own expectation. You have to understand that you don't have to always have the last say. You don't have to. You're not the one who has all the answers. You're not the one who's going to solve all the problems. You're not the one who should always have the limelight. You start learning that your job is you're more of a facilitator of a talent, and you need to create opportunities and experiences for others. So you'll give people a chance to try out. You don't have to speak in the next meeting. Maybe your intern could, and they're not going to be the same as you. You're going to do it better for sure than them. But it's not about that. It's short term. Maybe it's not going to be perfect. Long term, you just gave a young person an opportunity to have experience for the first time in their life, to present in front of a client, to share their opinion in the meeting. Remember yourself when you were that age. Like, you were scared and thinking, like, what if I say, are they going to think I'm stupid or not? And then it really mattered if you had a mentor who even give you space and say, hey, what do you think? And maybe you say something that's great. Maybe you say something that's not so great. But it's defeating the fear and then the feedback. And they're like, okay, how was that for you? And all of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree completely. When I look back on my time as a cadet and a young officer in the Air Force, the things that shaped me the most were those opportunities that I didn't necessarily seek, but were put in front of me.
Yeah.
And I was, I had leaders that cared enough to put those opportunities in front of me. And I was most of the time smart enough to take those opportunities. And those were the things that really had an impact on developing my leadership and developing me as a person and a young man.
Yeah. I remember the first time, because I was activist in Serbia, but that activism doesn't pay. I had also a day job. So I was like working 80 hours weeks, basically, between 40 hours of paid job and 40 plus hours of activism. I was 22. My boss asked me, I was in finance, and my boss asked me, "Hey, Nikola, you're going to present in the next meeting for our potential clients." And it was this medical company. And man, I was scared. And then he said, "I'll tell you about how to do presentation. I'll coach you a little bit." But the difference was that if I just took some kind of a course on how to present, would be very different than if I was coached by a person who is my boss for the actual event that's going to happen in a week. Because the urgency is right, urgency and the skin in the game is right there. And man, you're ready. Like I'm going to get in front of some 40 doctors in a week. So your motivation to learn fast is through the roof. And that's why my approach to leadership is whenever I'm teaching whatever the skill is, always anchor it in something real. Are we going to, okay, let me teach you a difficult conversation. And then I ask, what is the conversation that you keep avoiding? Everybody has that one. Like, okay, can we anchor that? You're going to have that conversation in 2 weeks. Now let me teach you about difficult conversations. And then and then it changes really the mind, because now you're thinking, oh, you reference, oh, how I'm going to use this. And then the theory starts becoming, you're already playing in your head how this might play out. And you're motivated because, man, I'm going to do it in 2 weeks, or, it changes the way you think.
What are some of the differences you find between developing young activists into leaders and your corporate clients? And what are the parallels? What's similar?
That's a good question. I'll tell you. So, and kind of to finish answering the last question, after that movement in Serbia in 2017, we started this new political party in Europe. So there was a political movement with the same approach of building an organization through intense leadership development and creating space. And that became a thing, and it's still alive and bigger than ever, and it has representation in the European Parliament and so forth. So the approach we used on pure grassroots activism works also in politics, and it works across countries, because we with this movement Volt Europa, we had like 34 countries. And then we took it to the next level with something that's called World Liberty Congress, where I got to work with the world famous activists, where some from 60 plus countries that are currently authoritarian. So and that's that we're building right now, and that's where I saw potential difference between teaching younger folks under 40 and maybe folks above 40. So that's first distinction. Like I see more differences in age than I see cross sector. Like you asked about private business or company, there's no difference. Like you have to lead people, and the difference is that in private company or government, wherever there's some kind of a formal structure where people are not volunteers but they're paid, you have more formal authority. So you can, it's easier to rely on that formal authority and to maybe overuse it. You could just say, hey, you need to do this. And you don't have to imply that this is because you're paid. But guess what? That's not going to get you what everybody's asking for, which is self-starting, motivated, innovative employee. That's not how you get it. The way you get that is by using what I just talked about. You have to, and again, to the listeners and viewers and to you, think about a time where you felt motivated, inspired, and you excelled in your work. It was not because someone told you to do something that, oh, this is your job. it's something else. Either the person that or the team that you work with gave you some kind of a purpose, or you felt you were given a chance and someone trusted you. So you had to, yeah, you had to have some kind of motivation that's beyond just, oh, I'm getting paid. There's nothing wrong with getting paid. I think it's very important that people get paid because the world we live in, we need money to even to be free in so many different ways. But what I'm getting at is that no matter, this is my experience, if I'm teaching leadership skills to an activist or to a CEO or to a politician, it all boils down to the basic human traits of how do you understand who you are, how do you deal with your own insecurities, because insecurities will make you abuse power because you might overprotect, overreact. How do you craft your own identity? How would you build trust and relationship with others? How do you understand your own role within any system, your purpose, your significance? And how do you understand problems that involve people? This is systems thinking and group dynamics, and how do you understand what's happening in the room. This is what I teach, right? Not it's amazing how few people learn systematically, for example, how to build trust. Like that's a skill you can learn. Or how few people learn how to read a room. If you want to be an effective military commander or a politician or CEO or activist, you you're going to spend a lot of time with people, and you're going to have to face thing. You better be able to understand what's going on around you and what is the dynamics in the room, in the meeting, or wherever you are, because that's going to tell you what is the right thing to do at the moment. It's going to make you wait. You're going to start noticing um, things that almost everybody misses. You're going to notice who is paying attention to what. You're going to notice silent and hidden coalitions. You're going to notice hidden relationships. You're going to notice so much. And this is something you can learn. It sounds like magic. I know. So, and I do it in class because I practice a lot of noticing and getting on the balcony and paying attention to what's going on. That I use it in my class, and I reflect it back to my cohort, to my students, and they're like, "Oh my God, how did you notice that?" While you were teaching at the same time. We're like, well, that's a habit. You can learn the same. And can you imagine when this, what seems like a magic, where you can talk and notice that that person is not listening, that the other person is excited about what you're saying, that person is actually trying to communicate with other person across the hall, and they maybe have some kind of collision, and you're noticing that this person reacted with this kind of facial expression. Like you can see all of these things. And just to finish it here, to tie it back, to also have a background in playing basketball, and I had some really good coaches, like some of them quite famous. And one of my favorite coaches, Nenad Trajkovic, who is quite famous in Europe, he said the best playmakers, and I used to be a playmaker or point guard, they're in control of their own body and the ball, right? They see all other 9 players on the field. They also hear their own coach, because usually the coach is yelling something at you. And at the same time, they have an eye on the prettiest lady in the audience. He was joking, but like
that's why we're all playing sports to begin
right,
with.
especially when you're like teenager. But his point was that you're meta aware, and I want to ask everyone, if you didn't watch The Last Dance, that amazing show. In the last episode, there's a 2 minutes or 1 minute, even maybe even less, that tells you everything you need to know about someone who is great as Michael Jordan. And it's not about his ability to shoot, his ability to do. It's He says at one point, his coach says, his fitness coach says, everybody's going to these meditation retreats and they're trying to be present, and Michael, he's just always present with the mindset it's all about the next play. And then they go back to a shot of Michael Jordan, and he says, why would they even think about the shot, missing a shot that I haven't even made yet? His superpower of becoming the best basketball player in the history probably was being present. And I teach people a lot of that, a lot about being present. When you're present, then you can notice. When you notice, then you can be extremely strategic with, you understand what's happening in the room and what you need to say to make things happen.
And it does take practice, but it is something that can be practiced. It is a skill that can be taught, and it's great that you are teaching it to people. So let's take a little bit of a break from the serious questions. Let's play a game.
Yep.
Are you up for a game?
Let's do it.
All right. The name of this game is Rapid Response. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I want you to respond with the first thing that comes to your mind. Doesn't need to be a one-word answer. Elaborate as much or as little as you'd like to, but we're just looking to get the first thing that comes to your mind, okay?
Okay, that's right.
All right, ready to start?
Yeah.
All right. Nikola Ilic, rapid response round. Your time begins now. Podcast recommendation.
Huberman Lab.
Okay, that's a great one. One question we should all be asking ourselves about living in a democracy.
What are you, or what am I ready to do and sacrifice so that future generations are a bit more free than I am today?
I think that's a question we should all be asking ourselves no matter what, but that's a great one. Thank you for that answer. Someone we should all be paying attention to.
Who are you becoming yourself?
Very good one. I like that. All right, you get a choice here. Don't answer right away. What is your get pumped up song or your walk on music?
Right now it's Aerosmith song Pink.
Oh, okay. Nice. The biggest influence in your life?
Marshall Gantz, professor from Harvard, yeah.
I don't think you're the only person who would say that. A book everyone should read?
Practical Wisdom. Amazing book.
You're in DC, so it's probably not terribly cold there.
No.
Something you're looking forward to as the weather gets warmer?
Playing tennis with my family outside.
Your dream vacation spot?
I feel like I kind of did it. Seychelles. I went with my wife there for our honeymoon.
Oh, congratulations.
I want to go back.
Yeah, I've never been. It sounds amazing. I definitely want to go as well. A future work or leadership trend you're excited about?
The use of virtual reality in leadership development.
Yeah, I'm excited about that as well. The ability to, interacting on a flat screen is great, but interacting in a 3D world, I think, is going to really allow us to have much more meaningful and intimate remote connections. Last one. Your favorite sports team or player?
Nikola Jokic. He's, the best NBA player right now, and he comes also from Serbia. But what I admire about him is he is so selfless. He is the guy who has, I would say, not much of athleticism. He's not fast. He can't jump. He is tall, but he uses his mind and he involves his players, and he's able to bring average team of Denver Nuggets to the championship level, and that's leadership.
Yeah, he's kind of the ultimate team player, right?
Yes. He has this saying that he always says. When he was younger, his coach said, if you score, one person is happy. If you make an assist, then two people are happy. He keeps saying that, and that's a really cool thing to say, right? So that's his kind of like playing philosophy.
I think I'm gonna, if a poster of that does not already exist, I think I'm gonna get a poster of that made up and give it to just about everybody I know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for playing our game. It's always a lot of fun to get to know people in a way that the serious questions don't always let us get to know you. So you were just on a panel about using art in activism. How can we use art to inspire our teams and bring people together on our teams?
Oh, that's a good question. First, one thing about art. why we admire and why art can be so powerful, especially when it comes to change, is that thinking emerges first in artistic form before we're able to articulate it in words, even our thought. That's why, I mean, again, question two. I like to make it interactive, even when we have listeners or viewers far. But like, how many of you had at least one thing that you couldn't put to words? Like, oh, I'm trying to find the right word, which means your thought is here, and it's more in some kind of artistic form. And then and there's evolutionary reason for that. That's why kids can learn how to walk without us giving them any instructions. We have this whole mechanism in our brains that allows us to learn without symbols, without words. That's called tacit learning. Going back to that, that system is way older than our ability to speak. Language is quite narrow compared to the thought. Art is possibly more accurate representation of thought than words. So that's why people say a painting or picture is 1,000 words. And very often, if you want to see the change that is coming, the humans, as the societies, will first express it through some kind of art before it gets articulated into some kind of a book or a thought or a podcast or whatever, something with words. And that's power, like that power of a symbolism that can touch you on a level that words can't. And I'm not saying words can be art too, right? Um, Poetry and literature. But that's what art can do for companies, for change, for think about powerful logo, or think about powerful symbol that represents a movement or a product or an idea. Art can touch people deeper than words, I guess.
Yeah, it sure can. I mean, symbolism and creativity are, they're very human, much more so than words or text or even physical things on a page or a book.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
you have had to get creative doing some things in your activist days. What are some of the creative things you had to do as an activist?
yeah, yeah. Just to build on the thought you just had, I had I was at this festival with a few weeks ago, with a few artivists, art activists. One of them was this famous Persian painter, young painter, Ali Reza. And I asked him, we were in the cab, how did you become a painter? And he said, I just never stopped. He said, we are all born as little artists. As the kids, we all draw and sing and perform and pretend. And I have two little daughters, Mila and Sophia, and I'm like, wow, that's exactly what I do, right? And then he said, and then some people stop, and I just didn't stop. I just kept going, and that got me thinking of how much there's playfulness in art. So when it comes to the activism or really anything, the art allows for playfulness. Playfulness is fun, and when you're doing something that's fun, it doesn't feel like work. uh, the art or the playfulness we used in we would beyond like funny slogans and all of that. We would have, for example, we wanted to showcase how the quality of air in the city of my of origin, Belgrade, where I was born, how quality of air was bad. So we had about 70, 80, maybe 100 people on street, all simultaneously pretending as if we're suffocating, and we just lay down on the ground as if there's something. And everybody, this is a very busy street where and everybody was like, oh my god, what's going on? And we and then we slowly got up with the signs and draw a lot of attention. So that's like a little flash mob, for example, right?
Yeah, it's certainly more effective than than screaming from a rooftop about how many parts per million of particulate matter is in the air, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing, right? Storytelling and art have power of transmitting both emotion, right? They're touching you deeper, and then you're ready to act. It's very different. I like to use an example. In Europe in 2015, there were all these different refugees, about a million of them coming from Middle East, Syria, and so forth. And there was debate and the numbers and 300,000, this many, this many, this many. And some people care, some people didn't. And then there was a picture of, and everybody, like this picture made it world news, of, I don't know if it was a 3, 4 year old boy. I think his name was Arslan or something like that, who was dead, washed on a Greek beach, face down. And that picture changed everything. Because it was not a number, it was not nameless, it was a kid with a name who, you know, what the hell do you do and know when you're 3 or 4? It was, we think about kids as the potential. Every kid can be who knows what, a future president, a scientist who's going to save us from cancer. Who knows, right? That's why we cherish kids, because kids have all this potential. And there's this one with all this potential dead. But that picture and the name create a narrative, and then Europeans did something, especially Germany. That's, if you talk about leadership, you talk about change. If you talk about change, you cannot drive change only with cognitive part of your mind. Try to make any decision just based on rationale, and you'll make many wrong choices. We are designed to lead with both rational, or what we call rational, but also with emotional. And there are studies to show you that if you're incapable of experiencing emotion, you will not be able to make a decision physically. Like, you cannot make a decision. So that's the power of art and the narratives, to engage the emotion, because the emotion creates that capacity, that emotional capacity to face whatever the challenge you need to face in order to lead. And just going back, the way I see leadership is that leadership is about dealing with uncertainty. It's answering this question: what do you do when you don't know what to do? Or, like, I like to ask a question: how many snakes are in the dark? Anything between 0 and 1 million, right? So you don't know. So what is the appropriate reaction? And dealing with this uncertainty will create emotions that might freeze you, like you might feel fear, or you're alone, maybe isolated. And the act of leadership is, how do you enable yourself and others to transition to action-oriented emotions of hope, solidarity, and so forth. And yeah.
I'm glad you brought up uncertainty. And sometimes we freeze when we're faced with uncertainty.
Yeah.
Because sometimes as leaders, we get uncertain because our own values come into conflict with each other. Not our values with someone else, not our values with our organization, our own personal values come into conflict with each other, and one needs to be sacrificed for another. What's your advice for navigating? Because there are two kinds of leaders. Leaders who have had to make that choice and leaders who will, right?
Yeah.
So what's your advice for navigating making that kind of choice between our own personal values, and how do you prepare yourself for that?
Yeah. It's a big question I wrestle a lot with, and I it's part of my teaching. I like to say, people these days talk about values in isolation. Like, I value freedom, I value compassion, I value this, but then exactly what you're asking is, in real life, values compete, and you have to sacrifice one value in order to honor something else, some other important value. And I think, just because we did touch upon a bit of democracy and democratic leadership and uncertainty, look, in the face of uncertainty, you will feel some kind of anxiety. And this is, look at the kids, for example, right? My 4-year-old Sophia, when she is anxious, something, she's scared, there's something, she doesn't know what's going on, what she does, she immediately looks for a trusted authority to help her out: mother, father, a nanny. Which means that from early age, we learn this behavior. It's a habit that if there's a challenge and uncertainty, you feel anxiety, find authority to help you out. If you don't unlearn this behavior, That's a path to the dark side. That's you not learning how to access your own agency. Tomorrow, maybe you can be 20, 30, 40, 50. And in the face of uncertainty, and can be anything, it can be a war, it can be a loss of job, it can be fabricated uncertainty. Someone is coming for you, like many authoritarians, or it can be, it doesn't have to be politicians, it can be like in your office. Oh, we're about to lose the client, whatever. Your default response might be to surrender your personal autonomy to someone else. Say, oh, tell us what to do, because you have that habit of reliance on authority. What I'm teaching people is how to break that habit, and how to, in face of uncertainty, you activate self-agency and connect to others and defeat the fear and isolation with hope and togetherness, because that's what it takes to solve problems. When you face these kind of challenges, when you have to make tough decisions, when you have to, maybe you're walking down the street and you see, this is the story I share very often, maybe you see a man beating up a woman who has a baby in her stroller. That happened to me in M Street here in Washington D.C. And 20 people, 30 people were just surrounding that event and like taking pictures. And I'm like, and then this is the moment of truth. Probably everybody listening to this, watching to this, would disagree with that man. Like, hey, you shouldn't beat up a woman. Non-violent. It's not good to be violent in general. That's your value. But then the question from all of you listening and watching is, what would you do? Would you jump in? Would you try to stop it? And it's okay and probably you would feel some hesitation, and that's uncovering something, that you have so-called aspired values. Those are the values that you're aware of, you aspire to, you know that you have and you want to practice. And then there are those so-called enacted values. These are values that actually you put to action. And very often there's disparity. Why? Just for the reasons in this example, where while you do have aspired value of anti-violence and justice, you also have enacted value of self-preservation. You don't want to get hurt. And they are fighting. Then the question becomes, what are you ready to sacrifice to do the right thing? And this is another habit. People that we admire sacrifice something for greater good. What does it mean? And I also teach ethics at Georgetown, but practical ethics. For me, the ultimate ethical framework is, when you're doing something, the more people benefit from that, the more ethical the decision is. That doesn't mean sometimes you won't do something that's only for you or for your family, but if it's at the expense of others, then you want to reconsider. So whenever you're trying, whenever you have a tough decision to make, the first choice, or the advice I have, you ask for advice, is flesh out and be clear about what are you sacrificing. Because if you do nothing in the face of injustice, you're still sacrificing something. You sacrifice that value that you think you should honor, but you didn't. That's going to impact your self-esteem. Then you're not the person that you thought you were. And that's sacrifice too.
It sounds like, I shouldn't say it sounds like, it's true. Self-reflection is a very important skill for leaders to develop. You've developed that really well. You're helping people develop that skill. Self-reflection is not always taught in a way that sticks. How can our audience start building a practice of self-reflection? Maybe not with a question so hard as, what are you willing to sacrifice? But can you give us a question or prompt to start with that we can start doing some self-reflective journaling about?
Yeah. So first of all, self-reflection is one of the most powerful, the most simple habits that you can start developing if you want to become a better human being, better leader, better anything. Because self-reflection allows you to uncover things that are behind your decisions. I like to ask this question: how many of you listening to this have ever surprised yourself? Well, then the question, probably everybody, right? So how do you surprise yourself? So, which means that there's disparity between enacted and aspired values, right? It's like you thought you would do something, but something else happened. Oh, what just happened? Sometimes it's positive, like, oh, I was braver than I thought. Sometimes it's going to be negative, like, oh, I thought I'm going to do this, but I was scared. Self-reflection answer the question, what's behind that? So what I do every day, I journal for like between 5 and 20 minutes on the most important events from the last from yesterday. How did I show up in this meeting? What did I notice? Oh, I was scared. I thought I'm going to say this, but I didn't. And then I asked myself, what's behind that? But how to start developing this habit? I invite you to do this. For the next 7 days, spend just 1 minute asking yourself, what was important that happened yesterday? Choose an event. It can be a meeting, just one event, a meeting or conversation, whatever. And then ask yourself, what did I notice about myself in that event? That's it. 1 minute for 7 days. You want to start, or whenever you change a habit, you want to start to be small. And another thing to make it even more successful, this is how I developed my habit. Attach that new habit of journaling, or journaling is much better than anything else. Like if you write with your hand, even better. I do it on my computer. Attach that new habit to existing habit. Like what I did, I said from now on, for next week, I'm gonna journal for 1 minute. I'm going to choose one event and ask myself, what did I notice about myself? And I'm going to do that the moment I make my first espresso in the morning. And guess what? I make espresso every morning. And I love my espresso in the morning. And I'm attaching a new habit to a trigger. So I pick up espresso, journaling time. But it's also a positive habit. I love my espresso. So now 10 years later, I still journal with my espresso. And it's like positive enforcement. I love espressos. I love journaling. Now I can journal for 20 minutes.
I love that advice. I think that's going to help all of us go a long way towards becoming the kind of leaders we say we want to be. So I'm excited to try that myself and tying it to a habit. So as we wrap up, what's coming up for you and ChangeLab and all the other things you have going coming up in 2025?
Yeah. So 3 major things. One is I'm very excited about launching our AI supported trainings. We're working on that. Actually, I'm going to have a meeting about this after this podcast. So that's one thing. We're building this product where we want to enable people to learn leadership with the AI support, which will make it even more precise, even more targeted, and at exactly what you need. So that's one thing. The second thing, I'm really looking forward to expanding my newsletter. We have a free newsletter, Pulse of Change. Check it out, where on a weekly basis, I write about different topics on leadership. Last one was how do you meet your demons and how do you deal with your insecurities? Because not dealing with insecurities and then getting some power is a path to some kind of authoritarian behavior. And just to be clear, when I say authoritarian behavior, again, not politician. You have authoritarian bosses everywhere, from students working groups to a office and so forth. So that's also my whole idea, that you can practice democracy daily by creating democratic spaces where you can enable people to have good, difficult conversations they need to have, expand trust, go deep, involve people, and create more agency, create more leadership. Simple as that. So that's Pulse of Change. Could be that's we have 10,000 people now subscribed. I want to have more. And then we're going to launch some new online trainings in June and July, where you're going to be able to learn about many of the things I talked about in self-paced courses. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
It sounds very exciting. Nikola, this has been an incredible privilege having you on the show today. Where can everyone find you so they can thank you for joining us?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Nikola Ilic. You can find changelabglobal.com. Google Pulse of Change newsletter. We also just started a podcast where we interview different activists and people with ridiculous life stories. So yeah, I'm looking forward to connect. And thank you so much for having me. This is such such an interesting conversation with you.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for joining us, folks. Jump on that podcast. Listen to these activist stories, and folks who are watching and listening. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. If you found Nikola and this conversation valuable, go ahead and share it with someone who can use it. Leave us a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. If you're on a podcast platform where you can leave a review, please give us a 5-star review. It helps us build the audience, get great stories like Nikola's out to the world and out to a bigger audience. We've got lots more amazing leaders coming your way. So go out there, do great things today. Onward and upward.